Didn't know exactly what the fire load was underneath the structure, but knew that there was going to be some petroleum-based fire, and the fire was chugging, so knew it was going to be a very dangerous situation. So at that point, just trying to set up to make sure that we could basically stabilize this structure and make sure that fire didn't go any further than where it was. So the biggest thing was just trying to get a hold of what was going on at that fire, get companies around the building to make sure that we could basically defend the rest of the area. So there were a couple of rescue operations going on at the same time. And 16 and the latter 2 companies, they at that time were setting up to begin their rescue operations. At this time, Chief Withers came in to give me support, and I basically passed information on to him and moved on to a different role. So that role lasted for the next 10 hours, so I'm not going to talk about all of that. But at that point, I moved on to other roles, and I'll pass it on to Chief Withers. He can speak on his half.
So next we'll have Chief Eric Withers. He ultimately came in and had command of the incident after he relieved Battalion Chief Brown, and Chief Brown went and engaged in the firefighting rescue operations, and Chief Withers took over command of the incident.
And I'll try to keep it brief. The true heroes are the guys that are wearing the blue shirts. From the outside, we had challenges. The challenges include the building that we knew at some point in time would be coming down, the exposures, and the amount of heat that as well as fire that the building was producing, trying to protect those to where we didn't have additional secondary damage and or property loss. We had the 2 victims. When we pulled up, myself as well as Chief Brown, there was still a chance, and if there's a chance, we're willing to take that risk and go inside and search for those 2 victims. As well as, and something that hasn't been brought up, is we were not exactly sure if there were other workers inside that were unaccounted for. Pulling up, we passed probably over 100 to 150 subs that were out in the yard, so there was still tenable places inside the building to where the workers could have been at. So whether it be the 2 that were accounted for that were still inside the building, and or the other victims and or workers that were inside that were unaccounted for, we were coming in to search. And then of course we had the crane operator that we were well aware of as well. And then at some point in time we had the Mayday that went on. A lot going on at the same time, but this is all processed through checklists up here to make sure that each, I guess, issue or each problem is being addressed. And these men and women that you see in blue are the ones that put their lives on the line to go inside those buildings to search for those two unaccounted for victims, as well as for the crane operator.
Next we'll have Chief Shane Nance come up and speak a little bit. He's the Battalion Chief of Battalion 3, which is over Special Operations here at this station, and he can give you a little insight into what he did that day.
Morning. I was actually on vacation the day of the fire and ended up reporting into duty. I'll keep it brief. It's said when somebody dials 911, it's the worst day of their life. I think anybody that saw the fire can attest that was somebody's worst day of their life. The rescue company works for me. When a firefighter calls 911, the rescue goes to work. Firefighters train every day for what happened last Thursday. The rescue trains every day for a firefighter in trouble. That's their principal responsibility. And I think it would be remiss to say just what Chief Withers said. We train for this contingency every day we come to work. You know, this is what we affectionately call the big one. And there's a lot of moving parts associated with this. There's a lot of remorse in each person's heart back here that you won't hear about today for the 2 lives that were lost. Firefighters don't talk about those types of things. So I would ask you not to ask about that type of stuff. But I have a lot of pride because of what went on out there last Thursday, especially the guys that work for me. And it's very comforting to know when you talk about the Maydays, firefighters can overextend because of what the rescue is capable of doing. it is very comforting knowing that people will come get you if you overextend. So that's really all I got. Y'all have any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Nance. I think it's important to highlight what he pointed out, that there were several firefighters and companies out there that responded in from their day off to come in to help. Next, we're going to have Captain Benson, who is over ladder 16. He's just going to give a brief overview of what they saw and faced upon their arrival as being one of the first two companies, and then you can have some questions for the firefighters on the back of ladder 16.
So when we pulled up, we had smoke coming out of the building, not too terribly bad. I knew what we had we could handle, and within just a few minutes, everything changed. Smoke got heavier. We started hearing reports of people trapped in the building. So me and my crew transitioned from firefighting role to a rescue role. So.
Any questions for the firefighters on back 16?
So when you go from that to rescue, were you already going in? What's your approach to the building? Are you going in or are you going out from the
So
outside?
my firefighters had gone in to locate the fire, to direct the engine companies that were immediately behind us. Engine 12 and Engine 14 arrived immediately behind us, and they were telling me, my crew was telling me where the fire was located so I could direct the engine companies to the fire. And then once they found the fire, they'd come back out, and we were told that there was people trapped somewhere in the building. So.
And how do you go about rescuing people in the building? And which levels and what part of the building were they working?
I'm sorry?
Where were they located? Levels and size of the building?
So my understanding, they were on the would have been the 6th floor,
All 15
and
rescues?
I'm not sure where the others were, just the two that we were being told of.
You mentioned in just a few minutes everything changed. Can you kind of describe, like, visually what that looks like for you guys and how you decide to switch your approach?
So when I say everything changed, when we transitioned to the rescue role, we still had pretty similar conditions as far as smoke, very little heat. When we transitioned to the rescue mode, in the middle of the rescue, trying to get up the ladder, smoke became very, very thick within probably a second or two. Firefighter McMillan had transitioned onto what turned out to be a pool deck on what was the 3rd floor, trying to make access to the victims. And the minute he stepped off the ladder, the smoke became much heavier, much more intense, and within just a second or two, that's when all the smoke changed to fire, and he had to come back down through that. No, sir. No, sir. We were checking on firefighter McMillan, making sure that he wasn't burned. Rescue 10 was taking care of them.
So visually, the fire smoke started on the side that is on Fairview,
Opposite side.
off by the retirement.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know how long your history is here or how long you've been with Charlotte Fire. Have you ever been in a situation like this before?
No.
Can you describe what was going through your mind when you said in just a few minutes everything just changed? We know you're so well trained and so well equipped for that, but can you kind of describe the steps of your thought process while this is all happening?
As far as when the smoke changed, I knew it had gone from bad to deadly. Deadly for, of course, whoever's inside, but deadly for us as well. And there was little to no little to no time to make a decision other than to make sure everybody got out.
I know there's been like a really huge public response to this fire. A lot of people have been reaching out, honoring you guys, thanking you guys for what you've done. People have called you guys heroes. I guess what do you guys think of the response from the public to you guys responding to that fire?
Thankful, overwhelmed.
Do you guys feel like heroes yourselves?
I don't. I feel like I showed up to do what my job was, just like them, just like Rescue 10, just like the Chiefs did.
This is a really delicate topic and people lost their lives. Is there something that the community can be doing to support you guys during this time or support your team?
I would refer to the public information officer for that.
Yeah, I mean, just back to how we started off, just know that this is what we do every day. So, I mean, it's not one time, it's every day. So,
Can you ask some of these gentlemen to describe what you saw when you got there and what kind of action you had to take?
Well,
You give your name.
my name's Sherrod Coates, Firefighter 2. Like my captain said, on our first initial arrival, it was light smoke coming out of the alpha side of the building. So myself and Firefighter McMillan, we made our way in to search for the fire, do a little recon with Station 12, Engine 12, until we heard the call go out that 2 people were trapped. Being on the ladder company, it's our job to switch from trying to find a fire to helping my guys with the rescue. So initially, it was just light smoke, everyday type fire, to all mayhem broke out.
Have you ever witnessed anything like this? How long have you been on the force?
I've been on the force 14 years, and this is the biggest fire I've seen.
Firefighter McMillan, you said you were in the building where
Yes. So I made it to the 3rd floor where I was able to see the victims on the Alpha Delta side. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do. The conditions of the building were just too much at that point. They worsened, and I had to escape. Second floor was engulfed in flames and smoke, and I was barely able to escape in time.
Were you amazed how quickly this fire, you know how fire works, how quickly it just went from smoke to individual fire?
I was. It was a very daunting experience, but I mean, we did everything we could. By the grace of God, we rescued who we could. No firefighters died, and we prevented massive devastations in the SouthPark area.
Can you elaborate a bit on you said
Yeah. So when I got up to the 3rd floor, I spotted the victims and I heard the screaming. That's when I noticed the conditions of the building start to change. A lot of smoke, heat was coming up to the 3rd floor, meaning that the fire was traveling up. So at that point, I knew that my life was in danger, and I had to jump on a ladder, revert back to my training, slide down, and thankfully Coat was at the bottom of the casting.
how are you all, can you describe your emotions just going through all this? How do you cope after seeing something like that?
So, to answer your question about emotions, it's a roller coaster, as you can imagine. A lot of questions in our heads. It is a continual process. I don't think you ever get to the end of it. So, it's many different emotions.
Let me just make one statement. Firefighter McMillan, he alerted that he got off on the 3rd floor, saw the victims, and couldn't reach them. They were on the 6th floor. So he got on the 3rd floor, was able to look up and see where they were. Okay, so they were not located on the third floor. Right? We'll make that distinction.
Yeah, can you tell me, was it an open, sort of open area, firefighters with no one could see those guys, was sort of an open area where you could see them working, or how did that look?
So, what he got off the ladder onto was we would call it a pool deck. Third floor open area, common area, for the future residents to, recreate, swim in a pool, whatever. And so he got off on the third floor, and that's where he was when everything changed on us. And like Chief said, the victims were on the sixth floor, probably 50 feet up, and probably another 100 feet away from him. So.
Are you all stationed here at Rescue 2?
Ladder 16, no, sir.
Okay. What was the mood like when you guys got back to the house? What was the mood like with you when you
I'm not going to answer that.
This was firefighter become you had to slide down the ladder.
Yeah.
Someone caught you, did you say?
Yes. So the second floor was engulfed in flames. We had a ladder to the third floor. So that smoke and that heat was traveling upwards on the ladder. There wasn't a lot of time to go down it, so I had to slide as fast as possible. And that speed, I could have hit the bottom and hurt myself. So Coach was down there near the first floor on the ladder to catch me.
Did you ever see anything like that?
No, but it's this reverted back to training, and I was okay because of that.
All right, next we'll move on to Captain Bright and Rescue 10, who effected the crane rescue.
All right, again, Captain Bright, company officer on Rescue 10 on A shift. And as Chief Nance alluded earlier, our sole responsibility is to be there for our own. On that day, we had a couple incidents take place. Fortunately, Ladder 1, which was initiated to Mayday, is where we diverted our efforts to initially. And those guys relied on their training to get them back to a safe space, which at that point, at that point, it gave us the opportunity to divert our efforts to Quincy. Which is the crane operator that was here earlier. You don't get that. You don't get the ability to talk to the guy that you helped save. Murphy, in the event, along with 3 others, we staged some equipment on the tower because unfortunately that his conditions become really bad before we could get to him. So I spoke with him on a radio for roughly 35 minutes, ensuring him we would come and get him. So with that, Murphy was able to extend all the way to the top of the ladder, provide him with some protective clothing, and that man come down like a cat. He was ready. But we stuck with him on the radio, assuring him that we would be there. The other guys on scene, the other aerial apparatus and hose lines that they had stretched to the adjacent building was to keep the crane cool, because we all know the dynamics of fire and what it does to metal, elongation, all those things. It doesn't mean anything to the civilian, but to us that means catastrophic failure. So our whole time we're thinking that the crane is going to take significant heat and we're going to watch it fall, on top of him being in a column of smoke or fire for an extended period of time. But 28 years on the job, I've never seen anything like that. And to talk to him on the radio and him tell you that he's down to his last bottle of water. So, I mean, thanks for Murphy and the other 3 or 4 that climbed that day, taking residual air pack stuff to put him on air if needed, to provide him protective clothing. But as Chief Nance said, and you know, emotions are running wild right now. But as he said before, I mean, we do train all the time for this type of an event. God forbid that it happens, but fortunately, he looks out after us. And probably the most important phone call that I've ever received was him. To know that we put it out on the line every day, and we will do everything in our power to help save anyone. But when you communicate and talk to a gentleman for 35 minutes on a radio, it means a lot. So to say, what can the community do? Just keep us in our thoughts and our prayers. We're here every day doing this. Fortunately, we all came home that night. I mean, fortunately, right? And Ladder One's not here today, but fortunately, they're still with us. We still think about the 2 that didn't make it. We think about the others that Chief Scaris mentioned earlier in his conversation that have passed earlier in this month. I think I even heard the fire chief in one of his briefings with y'all earlier in the week say that we want to be 100%. And the 2 that we lost that night, that makes us not 100%. So we live with that. We think about that. Not to take light of them 2 losing their lives, but that day things changed very rapidly, a lot faster than I've ever seen in my career. So sorry for the emotional roller coaster, but I think it shows what it means to the fire service. So I don't know, that's about all I can give you at this point. But
Any questions for
How's
anything?
Lucy? Spoke to him today when you came by?
so I've been in contact with him every day since the fire.
Is he better?
He's as good as any man could be, knowing that he lost 2 people that he tried to save. So, but he's doing good.
Can you describe how you go about stabilizing the crane with the hoses?
We have no way to stabilize the crane. That is just a risk analysis that we're going to take. We know what fire does to metal. We know all of those characteristics. But again, it goes back to that risk. We knew, and I knew verbally talking to him on the radio, that he was still alive, and there was no question. So when we say we'll risk a lot to gain a lot, we risked a lot that day, but we gained a lot.
So one of the things I want to add, and obviously Captain Bright's emotional, and you can tell from Captain Benson, we take this job really personally, right? There's people that go to careers and do things. We really take this personally, and I don't think people really understand that. And when Captain Bright talks about we will risk a lot to save a lot, you heard from both Firefighter McMillan and Firefighter Coates and Benson and Captain Bright. Like, they risked right up to the point where McMillan has to physically bail out of a 3rd floor onto a ladder, uncontrolled slide it down where Coates catches him at the bottom, just to save his own life. But we push ourselves as far as we physically can in what the gear will allow, because we care, and I don't want that ever to get lost. You can see, Captain Bright and I have known each other for a long time, and you know, it just, the emotions of what we do really play in sometimes, because we don't get to do that a lot, right? And it's the hard part of being able to talk to Quincy on the phone, on the radio for 35 minutes. And when he gets to the bottom, he's got a huge smile on his face. He gives you a hug, and he's like, "Get me the hell out of here." And it's those feelings like there's a lot of days we don't make a difference where people really recognize it, and it's those times when we do that really mean a lot to us. So I hope that never gets lost on anybody.
I got one quick thing. Our folks are good at what they do. And what they do, if it's humanly and divinely possible, is save lives. That's it in a nutshell. And what they did that day, I've been doing this 29 years in this town. I'm a lifelong charlatan. I've never seen what they did and what they did. You don't see it every day. We risk it every day, but what they pulled off that day is something unheard of. They saved lives. And that is the news story. They're good at what they do. Don't ever forget it. Because when you dial 911 4 minutes later, this is what you get. And they don't want to see nobody that looks like me. They want to see guys that look like them.
Any more questions for any of the rescuers or Ladder 16 or Captain Bright?
I don't know if it's for any of the firefighters or the chief, but can someone speak to the materials being used to build these buildings? Is there concern that these buildings are out of a lot of wood now rather than concrete, and the density of South Park and how challenging it is to get into a city block like that?
So obviously, everything is built according to North Carolina Building Code. Our challenge is in those buildings, right? So bottom couple floors, depending on that day, the bottom 2 floors are all concrete block, right? Obviously doesn't burn. Everything above that is lightweight wood. There's probably not a piece of wood in that building bigger than a 2x4. And when it is open like that, think of your own fire pit in your house when you put a new piece of wood on it. This building was no different. Our challenge comes in as much as we want the density and walkability to things, it is absolutely a challenge to us. When you take a building of that size, 300 foot by 100 foot, and you start a fire in we'll call it the middle of it, there's nothing that stops it. You know, so when Firefighter McMillan and Captain Benson and Coates talk about things changed in a minute, if you listen to any of the videos that are out there that folks took, you can hear the popping of the wood, and it's louder than anything I've ever heard. Even when I arrived, and it was after their event, the roar of the fire is things you don't hear of, and it's a challenge. We all understand the density and why they build the way they do. Some of the building codes are not friendly to what we do as a profession.
But does this fire, and I know everybody's still digging into it, does that help with training or anything else because of all the buildings that are going up?
So we've trained on buildings like this, right? They've been around for years and years and years and years. So we understand the hazards that come with them. We understand that, hey, the bottom 2 floors were concrete steps, and then above that, it was open scaffolding steps all the way to the 6th floor. You know, nothing to stop the smoke and the fire from traveling up in those stairwells. We understand that as soon as all that wood starts to go, collapse is imminent. You know, I think we did that with ladder 2. Not only did we leave it in place to protect the crane, but at the same time, we knew that, hey, we don't have time to move it either. It was in a perfect spot to protect that crane as best we could, but the collapse of that style construction it doesn't take long compared to what we'll call old building standards of solid wood. Strength-wise, they're great. There's very little collapse hazard to them unless they're under fire conditions. But a lot of the building systems that you would normally see in place when it's finished are just not there while it's under that construction. Do we train on it? Yeah. But just like you've heard the whole time is we were risking a lot to get the people that needed us because that's what we do.
And we can't go without acknowledging the rescue of the 15 other folks that were they just scattered? Were they just happen to be in the right place to be rescued? How did that look like?
So it's hard to say because could we sit there and say, I know where exactly everyone was? No, but as you heard from Chief Withers earlier, 100 people already coming out of the building. Our goal at that point is to make sure we are pushing everybody to where they can get out of the building as we're trying to locate the fire where it is and try to control it as quick as we can. As conditions change, as we're trying to get